Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Big Bros podcast. My name is Ilan, and I'm joined by my lovely friend and co-host, Jeremy. How are we?
I'm well, mate. How are you going?
I'm good. For anyone listening at home, you may not know this, but that took me 4 or 5 intros to get right. Usually, I'm really fine with the intros, but today I just couldn't get my words out.
There you go. It just happens. Happens to the best of us, mate.
I know. I had the yips. Anyways,
Had the yips. Maybe it's do you reckon it's kind of a factor or symptom as to being in a rut currently?
Oh, what a way to link in the episode, eh? Potentially. I mean, it's synonymous when things just aren't going right for you and you're in this little bit of a hole of incompetency, as I was about a minute ago. It can be a little bit of a symptom of a rut, but now that you actually bring it up, Jeremy, we're going to talk about how to get out of a rut, but I want to talk to you and to our listeners today specifically about the value of using momentum to get out of a rut. So I'll explain all of that, but I guess the episode today will center a lot about why we get into ruts, the fact that it's quite normal and common, some of the basic things to keep in mind if you want to get out of a rut, and some personal solutions I've used in the past that I think are very, very helpful. So I'm excited.
I'm excited too, mate. And look, it's all the more familiar to us currently. I mean, we're 24 years old, and you guys listening, if you're in your 20s or, in university or even just coming out of school and have experienced a shift in your life recently, whether that's a big life transition, this can feel all that common for you as it does feel for us. I mean, it's been a big life transition for me starting full-time work this year, and for you, Ilan, going into your master's. And we've had our moments this year of kind of feeling this way. At the moment, I feel like I'm in maybe a better place at the moment currently in terms of if we're thinking about ruts, but you might feel differently. And I think, it's important for you guys to recognize that you're not alone if you feel this way. It's so important to know that, because especially in our 20s, you're experiencing things, I reckon, on such a speed that is faster than maybe any other decade in your life. Everything feels like it's coming at you quickly. You've got new opportunities presenting. You've got jobs happening. You've got jobs closing. You've got relationships forming. You've got relationships ending. You've got the tendency to want to try and do 1,000,001 things. You're starting your morning routines, your skincare routines, your nighttime routines. And sometimes it feels like you're just trying to do everything at once, or the contrary being nothing at all. And you can find yourself feeling this way of being burnt out or feeling like you're in a rut.
It's so true. They did a study, I think, at Monash. I remember when I was attending Monash last year, I remember they did a study on students and their mental health across the year. The times where mental health was strongest was at the start of semester. So it was the months of, I'd say, February and July, August. And the worst months were May and June and October and November. And these were the months associated with, week 11, 12 assignments and then studying for exams. It's funny because now we're recording this in May. By the time it comes out, it'll be sometime in June. A lot of students will be feeling like they are in a rut. And it got me thinking, when I was submitting my honours last year, whether it was poor time management or whether it was just the stress of it all, I was in a rut, but not in maybe an academic sense, but in the physical fitness sense. I hadn't worked out for a while. I hadn't gymmed for like a good 2-3 weeks. Even going for a walk, I felt guilty doing that, because if it wasn't spent studying or, dedicating everything to my studies, I felt guilty about it. And I find myself even now almost getting into that rut of physical fitness again. So the last couple of weeks I've neglected my gym, I've neglected my jiu-jitsu because I've been so under the pump with uni. And I've recognized that it's a very normal thing. And I spoke to other people in my cohort, they're feeling the exact same way. So the thing with a rut is that it's not like it needs to be a rut with everything in your life. It could be one aspect of your life. For me, it's physical fitness, and I really value that. But that's just not been a priority, and it should be a priority. But I feel like I don't have the motivation because I feel like there's so many more important things I need to do.
Could you argue that maybe you can feel like you're in a rut from doing the same thing over and over again? Because right now, to me, it sounds like it's constantly being head in the books for you. You know, it's that time period in uni where you got exams coming up, you got assignments everywhere you look, and you know, you therefore have neglected the things that are potentially important to you, like the fitness, like your jiu-jitsu, and you've been in the routine of just books, study, books, study. Could we make the argument that being in a rut can be sometimes due to being in a stagnant routine or a consistent routine without much variance?
No, you're spot on there. I remember because I've listened to, so shout out to Gemma from the Psychology of Your 20s. She did a brilliant episode about why we get into ruts, and she spoke about the research, and it talks about that when people get into very rigid routines, your neural pathways become so used to the mundane and there's nothing to look forward to because you're just doing everything kind of almost on autopilot, right? And when you're doing things on autopilot, there's no novelty. So you lose a lot of pleasure because the thing with us humans, we crave novelty. And you're kind of right. My entire routine the last few days has been, it's either work or study. And for me, physical fitness is something that does give me a bit of novelty, right? If I go to jiu-jitsu, there's a bit of novelty in that because like I don't know what each class is going to be. It could be, you know, different techniques, different drilling. Even going to gym, there's a bit of novelty knowing I might, you know, do a different exercise. Maybe I'll increase my weight by 5 kilograms so I can have a, you know, a PR personal record. There's novelty in that. But when I'm just doing the same stuff, there's definitely something to that. And I think it becomes way more of a conscious effort to reintroduce novelty. But bro, it's insanely hard to do that when you're under pressure.
Absolutely. I think the first thing that comes to mind when I think about this is the old house I used to live in. We were living right next to a park. It was a small park, and the park had this trail, and you'll see this if, you know, you're in like a small little neighborhood and you've got a park nearby, and you know, you've got a fair amount of green grass around you, but then there's that dirt trail, that really dry dirt trail, because that's the path that typically people take to walk down or to cycle down, and they just trot on that specific patch. This is what I think it feels like when you're in a rut. You're constantly taking that same pathway, that same route, that same trail, and eventually the grass, which it originally was, that grass slowly over time, through the reps of you walking, through the reps of you riding on that same track, turns into hard, coarse, dry dirt. And I think that's a perfect analogy for being in a rut, because that's what it is. You know, something where you originally started off at and feeling quite fresh. You've done it so often. You've put in the reps so often that there's no novelty to it anymore. There's no difference, and it becomes dry and it becomes stagnant. And that's where you start to crave something that adds a bit of spark to it again. And that doesn't mean changing the path wholeheartedly, because, you know, if we use the example of just going to the gym, you know, you're constantly putting in the reps to go to the gym, and that's habit. But, you know, the spark that adds for me in my gym workouts is somewhat changing my workouts here and there, you know, every few months, tapering my splits up, trying different exercises. And that's what gives me that reinvigoration to go again. So it's not about changing your pathway entirely, but maybe just a little bit so that it doesn't just become a dry bike track.
Well, it's the same thing, I guess, in relationships. You can feel like you're in a rut in a relationship, and a rut in a relationship will only occur not at the start when the honeymoon period is there, but rather after maybe not even a few months, but a few years of getting to know that partner, because things start to become mundane. So it's up to you to create novelty, because when you're in that honeymoon phase of the relationship, everything's novel. So your brain is still developing the new neural pathways in terms of how you associate your partner and all the feelings, you know, you feel when you think about her or him. So there's always, I guess, a rut that's associated with a lack of novelty. And I think, especially when I think of someone who's going through a rut, I think of it in a very extreme sense. I think of the person who knows they need to get stuff done, but all they want to do is just stay in bed because they've got no motivation for anything. And it's almost like emblematic of a symptom of depression, which is called anhedonia, which is the loss of pleasure in doing things that, you know, traditionally that person would find enjoyable. So, you know, if, as an example, it could be for me wanting to see friends, but I don't really want to go see friends because I've lost the pleasure in doing that. I'm nowhere near that point, but when I think of a rut, that's usually a very extreme sense. And truthfully, man, everyone goes through a rut. And I remember speaking to someone about this, and they mentioned the point that, hyper successful CEO owners of, multinational corporations, they will experience ruts like everyone else. But what separates them is their ability to get over a rut and overcoming the stresses that they do. Because everyone's going to face a rut, but I guess it's the strategies we choose to employ to help us get out of that rut that really counts.
So we've identified, what it is we will feel and what it is, I guess, is emblematic of being in a rut, what to look out for to recognize that you are in a rut. So like you said, how do we break that cycle? How do we then start to implement the steps to get out of that rut, to build momentum, to go forwards? Because at the end of the day, it's on us. No one's going to get us out of the rut. We need to get ourselves out of the rut.
Well, let me ask you, because I'll reverse the question. Do you feel like having a purpose and a why is a big reason you're able to do the things you don't want to do in life?
Has to be. It has to be. Like, if I think of full-time work, of course there are going to be days, especially now I'm starting to feel it, where, the way my bedroom is situated at home, I'm like in the basement of the house, and boy, is it cold in the mornings. When you get out of bed, it is freezing. So there are mornings where I wake up and I'm like, it would just be so nice to get that extra 30 minutes of sleep and maybe not, go to work. But I have to remind myself some days, what is that driving force to get me out of bed, to go to work? And what is that why? You have to have that why. And for me, being a physiotherapist, that is, I want to be able to treat people, to make people feel better. That is my why.
Why do you want to do that though?
Why do I want to do that? Because that is what fulfills me. I get fulfillment and I get drive and happiness from making others feel better.
And why is that?
Why is that?
Well, we can get to a few of your core beliefs, but the point is, if you implement that exercise, you can truthfully uncover a very strong why for a lot of things. And I think a lot of people don't actually spend the time to think about their why. So that's why they end up in jobs that they hate, just, because they need the money and they're just going with the motions. And that's when it's really easy to get into a rut, is when you don't have a strong enough why, when you don't have a strong enough purpose. Because when you have a strong enough why, the how reveals itself.
I think we've realized as well that money is not a strong enough why. Everyone makes money that has a job. You're not doing a job for free. Everyone's out there doing a job and making money. But why do we so often see people, on LinkedIn starting and finishing jobs and jumping from one place to the next? Because that why isn't strong enough. And that's okay if you don't know what that why truly is. But it is that why at the end of the day that will keep you going and that will stop you from feeling like you're in that rut.
I mean, another really good example, if you want to make it simple. Well, first of all, back to what you were saying there, because it's actually an important point, because financial incentives are an incentive until they're not. What I mean by that is they're very good at motivating someone at the start, but the novelty of getting the pay that you kind of thought initially was amazing tends to wear off. And that's why you see so many people switching jobs for all the other benefits. Maybe they're earning 200K somewhere, but then they want to switch to a job where maybe they're getting 120K or 150K. Honestly, probably a very hyper successful position if they're earning that much money, but they might be trading less money in so that they can have better perks in terms of their work-life balance. So money's not the be-all, end-all, but your why can be, and that is fine. So like if I'm using the example of the gym, it's like if you don't want to go to the gym in the morning because, you're warm in bed, the last thing you want to do is lift weights, 20 minutes after you've woken up. If your why is a very deep why and it's could, link to the fact that, I don't want to just look strong, I want to feel strong. And then you ask yourself, well, why do you want to feel strong? Well, because it's going to give me a sense of confidence. And why is confidence important for you? Well, confidence is important for me because it informs how I behave with the people around me. And you can go down this rabbit hole, and then the more you go down that rabbit hole, it does require a bit of thinking. You will find a really strong purpose. So I think drawing upon your why when you are in a rut, it can almost be like lighting a match.
Absolutely. I think if we want to call it something, if we want to call this practical step something, I think it's the perfect word is reflective practice. Be reflective about why you're feeling this way currently in your rut, and what are the things that you will typically do to get out of feeling this way. For, like you said, for a lot of people, it might be some form of physical exercise. Maybe it's just as simple as listening to music that you like to listen to that maybe you just haven't listened to for a few days. That can be enough to reinvigorate your mood and make you feel happy again. And, it doesn't have to be something so grand as exercise. It can, or, going out and going to a cafe and taking yourself on a solo date. It can be so simple, like maybe just getting enough sleep, listening to good music, eating well, because how often when we feel like we're in a rut, and like I'm so guilty of this, you're probably guilty of it. We're all human. So we're all guilty of this probably. When you feel like you're in a rut, one, you reach for the junk food. You reach for the quick fixes, that sugar hit that gives you that dopamine. Two, you're probably not getting enough sleep. Your energy levels are low. You're relying on caffeine. You're caffeinated up. All of this is recipe for feeling more lousy, because you're spiking yourself up so high, and then the crash is just monumental. Get some bloody fruit and vegetables back into you. Rely on that as some energy, right? I think that is, at least for me, when I'm feeling lousy and lacking energy and substance, that is the first thing I go to. As simple as that is just eating more fruit and veggies. That really does reinvigorate me. So it's the simple things after all. You do the simple things right, and you're already miles ahead of the rest.
I would say that your nutrition is the fuel. If you treat yourself like a Ferrari, you'd want to be supplementing yourself with some premium 98 fuel.
Not 91 crap.
Not 91, even though it's a cheaper fuel. And, I'll be guilty when I say that I fill up my Mazda with 91, but it's really important. But I mean, that's what it is. I mean,
the right fuel for the right person.
The first practical things you want to do is obviously addressing your nutrition. So something I think about as well is when I really try, and especially when I know I've been lax with going to the gym, I try to make sure that at least my nutrition has been good. So making sure I'm still getting my protein, getting my fruit and veg, because I don't want to, just because I'm neglecting one area doesn't mean that everything else
doesn't all have to go out the window.
It's not all or nothing, and I'm going to speak about all or nothing thinking soon, but just looking at your nutrition is really important. And also just when you're sitting at your desk and you're feeling like you just have no motivation, no inspiration, changing your physical state. I am a massive proponent of using some sort of physiological circuit breaker to get you out of your head. And one of my favorites is using diaphragmatic breathing. And I use a thing where you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold for 2 seconds, and you breathe out for 6 seconds. And you do that for as many times as you want, but let's say over 3-4 minutes. You will change your, first of all, concentration of oxygen to deoxygenation. Fuck, I completely butchered that. But you end up just giving your brain more oxygen. You're able to think more clearly, and you're able to get yourself out of like a ruminative state where you're just feeling overwhelmed and feeling that lack of motivation. But that could also mean going for a walk. It could mean literally going outside and enjoying the sunshine. So I call these the basic steps. Maybe the why, finding your why, is a bit more advanced. But once you get those in check, you set yourself up quite well, I'd say.
Yeah, it doesn't have to just be simply physiological approaches like we've mentioned here. Physiological being your breathing, your eating, your sleeping. It can be as simple as changing your environment. Get out of the same bedroom that you've been studying in and put yourself in the kitchen with maybe a little bit more natural light. Simple as that. If you're constantly sitting at the desk at work, stand at, at a desk if that's available, or even if you just need to stand and put your desk on like some countertop that's out of the area where you normally work in, do that. And that's something that I actually did for myself this week, because I started to feel really stagnant being at a desk for too long. It's like I'm just trapped in this corner, and it changes your physical state. It changes your mental state. You start to feel that sense of stagnancy, and getting up and standing up and being in that different surrounding environment made me feel so much more better. So simple steps: physical environment, your nutrition, your physiology, and you're doing good things. If we want to think about things that are maybe a little bit more practical, maybe you want to be a little bit more deliberate with your approach rather. Just like you would, going to the gym if you want to track your nutrition, calorie count. How do you go about doing this if you want to be a little bit more numbers fixated, a little bit more statistics biased? What would you do?
Well, before I answer that question, I'm going to ask you a really random question. Last year, Carlton were doing shit, and then they somehow won how many games in a row to get into finals?
10.
10, and then they beat my beloved Days in a semi-final. They used a thing called momentum, because they were in a momentum losing streak, I'd say. They weren't winning enough games. And then out of nowhere, they had one of the best in-season turnarounds. What's going on there?
You're picking up on the small wins first, I reckon. It starts off with one game, as they say. And it's the old cliche that you hear coaches say. And that's, just 1 week at a time.
So obviously, I love sports when it comes to analogies, and I think when it comes to momentum, it's a massive thing. Momentum dominates sport. You always talk about coaches saying how, we weren't able to, mitigate the momentum of the other team, and it's an important thing, but it's not just important within a sports context. I'm a massive believer that if you're in a rut, it's difficult to get out because there's a momentum of the rut. So there needs to be some sort of circuit breaker, and that's the hardest part, is just finding that activation energy. So your best friend here is knowing that all you have to do is reintroduce small little wins. So I'm sure everyone who's listening to this podcast has heard about this idea before, but if you win enough moments in a day, you will win the day. If you win enough days, you'll win the week. If you win enough weeks, you win the month. And if you win enough months, you win the year. And if you win enough years, you'll end up winning the decade. And we know that if you win enough decades, well, you've had a pretty good life and you've had a pretty productive life. So it all starts with really small chunks. And sometimes it's understanding that getting one thing right in your day, one thing it might be all it takes to just light that spark. And I think not neglecting it and not almost brushing over your small achievements is a massive thing.
Yeah, and I think we need to be intentional about sometimes tracking this, like I mentioned before with the calorie counting, not that that's something that I think is necessary for a long period of time, but I think it's definitely necessary for a short period of time when you feel like you want to be intentional about something. So that's what I did as well. If we use the nutrition analogy, I was intentional for a period of my lifetime where I wanted to be really deliberate about my approach to fitness, that I would track my calories. And I gained benefit from that because I was able to see differences in my behaviors. If we want to be more behavioral about this now, let's track our behaviors. So how do we track our behaviors?
So when I was thinking of this episode, I was thinking about how I personally like to get myself out of a rut, and I gamify everything I do. So whether that's with my physical fitness, I use it specifically with my studies, I will gamify everything. And I use a lot of sports analogies. So I'll tell myself this is the premiership quarter, just hustle in for the next 20, 30 minutes. And I thought, yeah, that's fun because I'm gamifying it. But as you said, I think assigning a number to everything you do in a day can gamify things, but it makes things a bit more interesting. So what I mean by that is, and this might not work for everyone, but find every activity that brings you closer to your goals and assign it a +1. And that could be going to the gym, eating clean, giving your grandmother a call, doing something good that brings you closer to the goal, and assign a 1 to it. And everything that's taking you further away from that goal, whether that be poor sleep, poor nutrition, doom scrolling, procrastination, assign it a -1. Every day that you wake up, you start at 0. And at the end of the day, your goal is to be in the plus category rather than the negative category. The cool thing here is that you can start at 0 the next day. So if you've had a bad day, don't be hard on yourself. It is what it is. You start at 0 and you have a chance to kind of end your day in a plus. And the cool thing here is, as I said, if you win enough moments in a day and you win enough days, you win the week. If you have enough pluses during the week, you at least have now found a way to track, numerically that you've actually won the week. You can literally get an Excel spreadsheet. And look, honestly, this might be extreme for some people, but I back it because I think it's kind of interesting. I think it's cool. And, sometimes we want an objective measure to tell us that we're doing well. We don't want to just have it all up in our minds.
I freaking love that, mate. I absolutely love that. objectivity is important. You know, a lot of today's world is about subjective feelings, you know, relying on our emotions and our feelings to really make sense of the world around us. But a lot of it that's important as well is objectivity, you know, science. What's the evidence? What is the evidence to show that I am doing better, that this is improving? Something that I think about as being a physiotherapist every day. You know, someone comes in with a neck problem. I'm looking at the ranges of their neck. How am I improving that range to get them moving more? It's the same thing here. What behaviors are you improving to get you better, and tracking that with pluses and minuses? And, you know, like you said, yes, it might be a little bit extreme for some people, but, you know, if it was easy, would it really be getting you results? Nothing worth having in life is easy. It should take effort. It should take some level of challenge. And we used the analogy before of calorie counting. I don't think that's something that's necessary for a lifetime or for an extended long period of time, because it's hard and because you might always start to look at the thing as numbers rather than the enjoyment. But here it's a perfect crossover. It's a perfect contrast. And yeah, you might be starting to look at behaviors as numbers and you know, and rather than focusing on just doing the behavior itself. But, you know, we know that it is we know that it is short term in a sense, and it's not going to be your life doing this. And focusing on that for a short period of time is important to actualize what it is you're doing in those moments. And you will remember what is good for you and what is taking away from you, so that when it does come to the period of your life where you're not tracking anymore and you're not tracking your activity levels with plus ones and minus ones, you still subconsciously know whether that is a plus or a minus.
And the reason I love this is because, as I said earlier, we don't ever acknowledge our accomplishments. We just think of, you know, the next thing we have to cross off our checklist. And in a way, this reminds us and tells us that, hey, like, you know, you did something well, you got a plus today. And obviously you use this with caution, because similar to calorie counting, it's good because it gives you a little tracker, it keeps you informed. But at the same time, you don't want to rely on it to the extent of like, oh, if you've had a bad day and you end up with a minus, that's going to ruin your day. No, it's there to help you. I think the cool thing here especially is that it can give you that short burst of motivation and excitement. So look, if you're in a rut, it's finding those small little things that you know you can conquer, because that will give you momentum.
Absolutely, mate. I think on that note, I think we've really nailed great solutions here, objective solutions as well as subjective ones, and have nailed, you know, what the things are that we need to look out for when we're feeling this way. So if you guys have enjoyed, let us know. We would love to hear from you, and send it to someone that you think can actually find a lot of improvement from this as well. You know, if you're enjoying this type of episode and this style of content, can guarantee you've got mates around you that are going to benefit from it as well. So thanks for the support, guys. And yeah, we can't wait to hear from you about, you know, how you're getting out of your ruts and what you're doing to implement those changes in your behaviors.
Amen. Happy Tuesday, guys. See ya.
Bye.